Good morning, Union. What a pleasure to be with you once again. And I bring my greetings and hellos to your pastor and first family, Dr. Singleton, and to all of you, God's people, there at Union Baptist Church in Montclair. It's good to be with you once again. As it was read in your ears, I would like to come from the text from First Kings. If you'd permit me to read it once again, First Kings and the 17th chapter and the 7th verse, and it reads, "And it came to pass after a while that the brook dried up because there was no rain in the land." And my title today is going to be Living in the Gray Space. And I hope when I'm done, I can make some sense of all of that, connecting that title to the text. A few earlier this week, rather, I had the privilege. I was supervising some chaplains in the Department of Corrections, and I ran across a chaplain, and we had a conversation about black and white. And this wasn't a racial conversation. This was a conversation about mindset, about what we think and believe about certain things, how fixated we are about how things should be a certain way, and how we struggle to live in the gray, how we struggle to deal with the gray space, the space that's not either black or white, the space that's not either clear, but might be a little fuzzy, might have some uncertainty, may even cause us some anxiety. And I think it's a profound question to wrestle with, because most of our lives, we will encounter the gray. And the truth be told, if we want to grow, we have to grow through the gray space. We cannot talk about the gray space without having a conversation about the zone. Many of you have heard that term that was popularized in the comfort zone. It was authored by Judith Darwick, who wrote a book back in the 90s called Danger in the Comfort Zone. And her book really talked about three mindsets. One mindset was an entitlement mindset, and talking about people preoccupied with their rewards rather than their responsibility. The book was geared to corporations, but still offers us some insight about our own personal lives. And the second mindset was a fear mindset, that people are often paralyzed by the threat of layoff. And so instead of working to grow, they work to protect their jobs, not to get better at them. Then the third mindset is the mindset, the earning mindset, she calls it. And this is where these are folks that lean into a challenge. And when they lean into a challenge, they not only grow, but they're rewarded for leaning into the challenge. Today, the comfort zone has less to do with entitlement and what we do at work, but more with our mindset and our behavior and how we operate in our lives. The comfort zone has to do with our automatic thinking, that there are things we do that we do it automatically. We don't have to think about it, process it. It's easy for us. It's comfortable for us. Some of us might call this our routines. I have one of these comfort zones. I have a recliner at home. And when I come home from work, almost like routine, I try to relax myself. I kick off my shoes. I sit in that recliner. I lay it back slowly. I turn on the TV. Before you know it, like clockwork, in 10 minutes or less, I am fast asleep because I'm comfortable laying in what some folks call a lazy boy chair. And I think that happens to us in life oftentimes if we're not careful. We lay in the comfort chairs of life. We recline back and find that we doze off, and we need our rest for sure, but we don't really grow necessarily in that moment. In part, what keeps us from in our comfort zone is our fear of trying something new, our fear of the unknown. And often when we don't have a clear understanding of our situation, it triggers us, triggers our need to be safe and to find a safe place. And so we run to the comfort zone. That's why we even have comfort food in the comfort zone. And whether it's ice cream or pizza or whatever it is, we all have something, macaroni and cheese, something that we call comfort food. We cannot have meaningful growth, saints of God, in our lives if we're stuck in our comfort zones. As a matter of fact, if you desire, as I saw in your announcement today, to desire to level up, can't level up being comfortable. Leveling up requires for you to step out of your comfort zone. Level up requires for you to engage the grace spaces that God will allow us to engage, that will transform our personal lives and our communities and our churches. The comfort zone is not designed for growth. It's designed for the status quo. It's designed to keep you right where you are. And if you find yourself disliking your situation, but you won't move to change it, it's probably because you are stuck in your comfort zone. And this sermon invites you to take another look at that and to start to think about how you might live in the gray zone, in the gray spaces of your life, in the spaces that are less defined, in the spaces that are uneasy, in the spaces that are uncomfortable, in the spaces that challenge you, that God might be calling every one of us, not might be, calls every one of us, that we might step into that space so we might grow. Positive psychologists tell us that there are a couple of zones that we must go through to get to the growth zone. They talk about the comfort zone, which I just mentioned. They talk about the fear zone. They talk about the learning zone. And then they talk finally about the growth zone. And for us to get to the growth zone, we have to leave the safety of the familiar and what is expected in the comfort zone. When we leave that space, we often get to the space of the fear zone. And that's the zone where we doubt ourselves and we lack the confidence to go forward. And we wonder what is there because we fear the unknown. We fear that we might not be capable to do what it takes to be successful in that space. And then we move from the fear zone and we enter into the learning zone. And this is where we develop new skills, where we grow in our confidence, where we grow in our confidence in God and our faith, where we grow confidence at work and in relationships. We only learn that if we can press past our fear. And finally, when we're able to do that, we'll arrive in what they call the growth zone, where we realize some of our goals and where we see ourselves growing, and we can, not only do we see ourselves growing, others see the growth in us and even comment about it. See, this process of going through these different zones can be voluntary or involuntary. You've heard the story, maybe or maybe not, the story of how eagles care for their babies. At a certain point, they give them an involuntary kicking out of the nest. We use that phrase often ourselves, but literally what they do is they take their baby and they drop them out of the nest, out of the comfort zone of being fed by their parents. And it forces them to fly or to die. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that the eagle will never let the baby fall to the ground. Just before they get there, they'll snatch them up if they don't figure out how to flap their wings and learn. But the way they learn to grow and to be strong and to fly on their own is to be pushed out of the nest, out of the comfort zone. And I think God does that to us so many times, and oftentimes we bemoan it, and we don't like when we are pushed out of the comfort zone. Have you ever been in a place where God pushed you out of your comfort zone sooner than you were ready to move? You had it all set up in your home or at work or in a relationship, and something happened to disturb the security of that and to cause you to have to reconsider the situation you're in, so you can move, or just being somewhere God pushes you because he desires for you to grow and to move and to not get comfortable. To get the comfort zone, from the comfort zone to the fear zone, we need courage. As David said to Solomon in First Chronicles, be strong and courageous and do the work. And if you're going to get from the fear zone to the learning zone, we need perseverance. And James said, let perseverance finish its work, rather, so you may be mature and complete and not lacking anything. And if we want to get from the learning to the growth, we need to need some strength and belief. And the text says that we can remind ourselves that we can do all things through Christ that strengthen us. In our text, Elijah offers us some glimpse, or rather, I've gleaned some lessons about dealing with the gray space. First, let me offer some background about Elijah and this context. In the story that we're following, we just read, Elijah had to face Ahab. Ahab was the king that had fallen off the rails, so to speak. He was just doing whatever he wanted to do because his wife Jezebel, and really not just his wife, his parental lineage had begun to stray away from God, introducing all things that defile Jehovah God. And so Elijah was sent to pronounce a warning to Ahab. And so when he got to the king, he told the king essentially, it shall not rain or dew for years, as long until I open my mouth and declare it to be so. And so essentially he declared a famine upon the land. Elijah came to this town with a message from God. And you have to have some courage, some willingness to leave your comfort zone, to go to a king and declare such a message to him, to tell him God is going to punish you. God is not just going to punish you, but he's going to punish the nation for their sins. And so he did that and declared essentially a recession upon the land. The Israel economy goes into a recession. And Ahab, and rather Elijah, knowing that Ahab would be looking for him, the text said he goes and he hides in a cave near a brook. And in that cave, I love it because it's these caves where God helps us to deal with our comfort zone and our fear zone. It's in these caves where we can be paralyzed by our fears, by what we think our enemy is going to do to us, or what we think we're incapable of doing. So we don't move. We can get stuck in the caves of life. And Elijah gets comfortable hiding in the cave. He's comfortable because God is providing for him. God sends a raven to bring him food, and God allows him to have a brook there so he can get water to drink. And there's no risk for Elijah. He has little anxiety because Ahab don't know where to find him. God is hiding him in this region of the country. And so he becomes, I believe, somewhat comfortable. And God reminds us, sometimes he puts us in hiding, not for us to get comfortable, but for us to prepare to move on, for us to prepare to grow. God provides him a famine, provides for him rather, in the midst of a famine where everyone else is struggling to find food and struggling to find water. Ahab is comforted. Now, I don't know if the ravens brought lobster and steak, but he sure was eating good. It says in the morning and evening, they provided for him, and he had something to drink. I want you to notice the significance of the drinking, saints of God, because he is drinking at a body of water when there is a famine and there is water scarce all over the country to find. That's how much God cares for his people and will protect his messengers and send and protect you when you find yourself in famine situations. In the cave, God calls us to do some self-reflection, to kind of look at ourselves and to look at our own fears and anxiety. In the cave, he wants us to face those things that hold us back, to face the things that we think we can't get over. In the cave, he invites us to have a deeper relationship with him. And sometimes the way we deepen our relationship with him is to be isolated so we can spend some time with God. So we are not so busy and distracted by life and by the things around us, not so busy and distracted by folks that are talking about us. We're trying to respond to that, not so busy busy and distracted by the heat of our jobs and by the heat of just living in America, but we can sit down somewhere and just be with God by ourselves and seek and press into him that God might speak to us in the midst of all of what's going on in our lives. See, when God is pushing you to the gray zone, he'll show up in strange ways, having ravens and having things to come in unexpected provisions. So don't despise the folks that might come in your life that look like God would not send them to you. You never know who or what God will use to bless you. God will use a donkey to bless you, or a raven to bless you, or all matter of things to bless you. So be open that God is the God of our creation, and that he can do all things but fail. And so you see, you can never move out of your comfort zone. If we might miss God's miracle, rather, if we don't move out of our comfort zone. And so we are encouraged to move. And so now Elijah finds himself by this brook that he is enjoying so much. And at this brook, God refreshes him. You know, we all need some refreshments every now and then. We need to go to a place where we can be refreshed in the word of God. We need to find a space where we can be refreshed in the presence of God as we navigate our own gray spaces. We need to have more than just CNN and ABC and NBC and FOX providing our news and our information. We need to get our info from God, because when we get it from him, we'll have clarity and assurance. When we get our news from God, he will give us the right answer. When we get our news from God, he will order our steps. The Bible says he'll order our steps in his word. And so we ought to find the time to let God be our source of information. And so Elijah still comfortable, rather, still sitting there, and God wants him to grow. So God moved the water sources that Elijah was dependent on. And some expert tells us it took about a year, but the water dried up, and the source was gone. The brook, the text says, was dry. What do you do when your brook dries up? What do you do when the thing that you've been relying on dries up? What do you do when the thing you've been dependent on, the thing you've been hoping on, the thing that you've been living for is no longer there? When our finances are shaken and broken, especially now, many of you, with the way the stock market is fluctuating, you might be very nervous about your finances if you have money in the stock market. Or when relationships dry up, when friendships dry up, when relationships with spouses become broken and dry up, when our job situations dry up, the thing that we have depended on and the places where we've been working reliably on, when you get the word that you might be laid off, when you're forced to consider doing something else, when our brook dries up, the enemy would love to seep in at that time and to discourage you and to distract you and to make you anxious and full of fear. But God comes to us and says, fear not, be of good courage, because when the brook dries up, God is pushing you into your gray zone. When your brook dries up, God is pushing you out of your comfort zone. When your brook dries up, God is pushing you past your fear zone and into your learning zone so we can grow. Yes, this grace space is a space that he invites us to be a part of. So don't just stand by the brook when it dries. And some folks don't want to leave the brook. They're so comfortable with the brook that even when it's dry, they're attached to the brook. Even when the evidence says to move, we refuse to move because we'd rather stay with the dry brook we know than to venture out into the imagination of God and to move forward. They're stuck with the dry brook because of fear of the unknown. And some are holding on to jobs and Others are holding on to relationships and situations and friendships because we fear of letting go. We're afraid of the great space. We don't know what's out there, so we rather stay with the devil we know than the one we don't, as the saying would say. So you realize that some of your anxiety is because you're resisting the gray zone. Some of the tension that we're feeling in our lives is because we are pushing back the gray zone that God is trying to push to you. God is trying to drop you from the nest, but you're refusing to fly. And he's going to keep dropping you from the nest until you eventually force to move your wings and begin to fly and to soar into the heights that he desires for you to soar in. It's from our clinging to our comfort. It's from our clinging to our map of the world. It's from our clinging to our safe places that suppresses our growth, our spiritual growth, our personal growth, even our financial growth. God is calling us, saints of God, to the next level. And to do that, you must step into the gray zone. See, the gray zone is the space between black and white. It's the space around black and white. It's a space that is unfamiliar to you. It's the space that causes you anxiety and fear. It's the place that pulls you from being where you are to another place. See, when you're in the gray space, we encounter God's power. When you're willing to encounter the gray space, we encounter God's miracle. In the gray space, you encounter God's grace. You see, God waits for you to move from the space that you are, the place that you're holding on to and clinging to, because like Elijah, he wanted to teach Elijah, I'm drying up this brook because I want you not to rely on this source, not to rely on the things or even the blessings of yesterday. I want you to learn how to depend on me now and in the moment. I want you to trust me to move you forward, even when the brooks dry up, and even when things aren't working out the way that you hope it to work out, even when you seem like folks have left you and you're all by yourself. I want you to trust me, to walk with me. I want you to learn how to hold my hands in the great places and in the dark places, that I can lead you and bring you to the great places. That is the desire of God for you and for me. And it's in the great spaces that we meet the grace of God. It's in the great spaces that we encounter the miracles of God. It's in the great spaces that we are often blessed by God. The great spaces. And that's where he calls us. And every man of God, every prophet, every person in the Bible has experienced this. Moses experienced his great space at the burning bush. Joseph went through the pit and to Potiphar's house. These unfamiliar spaces. Paul experiences great spaces when he was on the Damascus road, not knowing what hit him and what was going on, but knowing enough to trust God that he might move forward. Even Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane and on the cross had a moment of great space, but the Lord knows that I need to pass through the grave that I can get to the growth. I need to pass to the grave so that I can get to the grace. I need to pass to the grave that God can move me into the place that he desires for me to be, that I might be bigger, stronger, better than I am. I might be fortified in my faith. I might trust the Lord more and have a deeper relationship with him. He calls us, saints of God, to learn how to live in the great space and not to hold on to the things that you're so familiar with and the things that you've known all your life, but to trust him enough to move, to take a step. That is what faith is all about. Faith is about you leaping into the great space. It's about you trusting God when you don't know. It's about you trusting God when you can't see God. It's about you trusting God when you can't feel God. It's about you trusting God when you don't see the hand of God doing anything in your life, but you know that the Lord is ordering your step because you are a child of God. This is the invitation he has for us. The invitation I have for you and for myself, that we no longer resist the grave, the unfamiliar. We no longer let our fears and our anxiety paralyze us from moving into the space that God would have us to move. And as you level up with God and trust God to lead you to the great space. God bless you. May heaven smile upon you.